Saint Drogo was a 12th century Flemish nobleman turned hermit whose life of extreme penance, pilgrimage, and solitude made him a figure of profound spiritual devotion. He was born in 1105 and died in 1186. He was venerated in the Catholic Church with his feast day on April 16, the same date as his death. He is canonized by popular acclamation, a pre-congregational canonization, and is the patron saint of an unusually eclectic array of causes: shepherds and their flocks, unattractive or physically unlovely people. His story is marked by tragedy from birth, a relentless pursuit of atonement, odd and severe penances, rare but striking miracles, and a posthumous legacy of veneration that includes annual processions and invocations for the overlooked and afflicted. What follows is a complete chronological account of his life, drawing on historical records, hagiographical traditions, and legends without omission of any known details. Saint Drogo was born on the 14th of March 1105 in the village of Epinoy, in the county of Artois, within the French portion of the county of Flanders, modern-day northern France, near the Belgian border. He came from a family of Flemish nobility minor nobles, but with sufficient wealth and land to afford him a sizable inheritance. His father, whose name is not recorded, died shortly before Drogo's birth, leaving the family in mourning. The true shadow over his infancy, however, fell during delivery. Drogo's mother died in childbirth, an event that nearly claimed his life as well. According to legend, he was saved only through an emergency caesarean section performed by a local doctor, a rare and rudimentary procedure for the era, underscoring the peril of his arrival. Orphaned at birth, the infant Drogo was raised by relatives in Epinoy, who provided for his education and upbringing in the manner befitting a noble youth. This early loss instilled in him a deep sense of survivor's guilt. As a child, he was haunted by the knowledge that his entry into the world had cost his mother her life, a belief he internalized as personal responsibility, what he saw as unintentional filicide. Though orphaned young, some accounts say as a teenager, after the death of guardians, he grew up in relative comfort, inheriting estates that could have secured a life of privilege. Drogo's childhood and adolescence were unremarkable in worldly terms, but the emotional weight of his mother's death grew heavier as he matured. By age 10, the full circumstances of her passing had been revealed to him, striking an indelible emotional blow and fueling a vocation to atonement. As he approached manhood around age 20, he experienced a profound conversion, inspired by Christ's words in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 19, verse 21. "If thou wilt be perfect, go sell what thou hast, and give to the poor, and thou shalt have treasure in heaven, and come follow me." Rejecting his noble birthright entirely, Drogo renounced his estates in favor of the next heirs, distributed his considerable inheritance to the poor, and set out with nothing but the clothes on his back, entrusting himself to divine providence. This act of total detachment marked the beginning of his life of voluntary poverty and penance, driven by a desire to imitate Christ and atone for what he perceived as his sin against his mother. Seeking solitude and labor, Drogo traveled a short distance to Sebourg, 2 leagues from Valenciennes, in modern Hainaut, Belgium, where he was hired as a shepherd by a wealthy local woman named Elizabeth de la Hare. For approximately 6 years, he tended her flocks with exceptional skill. He could read the weather like a seer, diagnose and cure the animals' illnesses using herbal remedies and intuition, and shared these shepherding arts with other locals, fostering a sense of community. The rural isolation suited his contemplative spirit. He spent his days in prayerful silence amid the fields, practicing rigorous mortifications even in youth fasting severely, wearing rough hair shirts beneath his tunic, and scourging himself in private. Any wages or gifts he received from Elizabeth or villagers, moved by his humility and gentleness, were immediately bestowed on the poor, leaving him with just enough for barley bread and water. His charity, devotion, and unassuming wisdom quickly earned him the affection of Sebourg's people, but this growing esteem posed a spiritual danger. The lure of praise threatened his pursuit of humility. Rumours also began to circulate of a rare miracle bilocation where he was reportedly seen simultaneously tending sheep in distant fields and attending Mass in the village church, kneeling devoutly or even ringing the bell. This phenomenon inspired a long-standing local adage among the rural folk persisting into the 20th century. "I'm not Saint Drogo, I can't ring the church bell for Mass and be in the procession." A humorous invocation when burdened with impossible tasks. To flee the peril of admiration and deepen his penance, Drogo left his shepherd's post around his early 30s and embarked on a life of pilgrimage, wandering as a beggar pilgrim across Europe. He made at least 9 separate journeys to Rome each, a grueling 9-month round trip on foot to venerate the tombs of Saints Peter and Paul, stopping at major shrines in France and Italy along the way, such as those in Compostela, Chartres, or Assisi, though specifics vary in accounts. Some traditions suggest he believed only the Pope could absolve his guilt over his mother's death, though he never sought an audience. These pilgrimages were acts of profound self-abnegation. He begged for sustenance, endured hunger, thirst, exposure to harsh weather, banditry, and other perils without complaint, sleeping in hedgerows or church porches. Between voyages, he periodically returned to Sebourg, where his reputation for holiness only intensified, drawing crowds who sought his counsel on matters of faith, marriage, or farming. To evade this, he would depart again, perpetuating a cycle of restless wandering. During these travels, he occasionally worked odd jobs as a shepherd to sustain himself, passing on his expertise to fellow herdsmen he met. The physical toll was immense. After his 9th pilgrimage, in his mid-30s or early 40s, Drogo contracted a severe hernia that became debilitating and disfiguring, swelling painfully and developing into putrescent sores on his lower body. This affliction ended his travels, forcing a permanent return to Sebourg around 1145, where he resolved to embrace enclosure as his final penance. Back in Sebourg, Drogo petitioned the local priest for permission to live as an anchorite, a walled-in hermit attached to the parish church of Saint-Martin. The villagers, devoted to him, collectively built a small, austere cell, a single room, about 10 x 10 feet abutting the church wall, completed with 2 small windows, one facing the exterior for receiving alms, food, water, or firewood, and offering counsel to visitors, and another into the nave for viewing the altar, hearing Mass, receiving communion, and participating in the divine office. He vowed never to leave this cell until death, sealing himself in with a solemn rite, a commitment he upheld for 45 years. His daily life was one of unyielding penance and union with God, far odder and more severe than typical anchorites. He subsisted on a minimal diet of barley bread, rejecting richer foods and giving away any excess to the poor through his window. He occasionally warmed his barley in hot water, a simple ritual later fancifully linked to coffee brewing. Penances included prolonged fasting, wearing a hair shirt, self-flagellation, and standing or kneeling in prayer for hours, often through the night in vigil, emulating Christ's agony. His hernia worsened into chronic, foul-smelling ulcers that caused excruciating pain and further disfigurement, rendering his appearance repulsive out of humility and to avoid scandalizing visitors, especially children, whom later legends claim he frightened. He often veiled his face or declined visual contact, deepening his isolation. Yet, his spirit remained serene and joyful. He counseled all who came pilgrims, villagers, the afflicted, offering words of consolation, edification, and practical wisdom on prayer, charity, and endurance, leaving them transformed. Despite seclusion, his holiness radiated. The bilocation rumors persisted, and his cell became a beacon for those seeking spiritual fatherhood. One rare, dramatic miracle occurred during his anchorite years. The church of Saint Martin caught fire, engulfing the entire structure and his cell in flames. Friends and villagers rushed to extract him, but Drogo refused, kneeling steadfastly in prayer and declaring his vow bound him to the cell until death. Miraculously, the inferno consumed the church and hermitage, but left him utterly unharmed, not a hair singed, his cell's contents intact as if shielded by divine fireproofing. After 45 years of enclosure, Drogo died peacefully in his cell on the 16th of April 1186, at age 81, surrounded by the prayers of Sebourg's faithful. His body, frail from decades of austerity, yet radiating peace, was prepared for burial with simple honors. Immediately, a dispute arose. His kin from Epinoy claimed the right to repatriate his remains to his birthplace, placing the body in a fine casket on an ox-drawn cart for transport. As the procession departed Sebourg, however, the casket inexplicably grew heavier with each step, the oxen straining until the cart halted immovable at the village boundary, a supernatural sign of divine will. Terrified, the Epinoy relatives relented, and the body was returned amid rejoicing. The spot where the cart stopped was marked with a cross, replaced several times over centuries, but still standing today in a Sebourg field. Drogo was interred humbly in the church of St. Martin, his tomb quickly becoming a site of pilgrimage. Miracles proliferated at his tomb almost immediately. Healings of hernias, fevers, mental torments, and deformities drew throngs of pilgrims, overwhelming the church and prompting the construction of a dedicated chapel over his relics. By the late Middle Ages, his cult was firmly established by popular acclaim, vox populi, with no formal beatification needed. In 1609, Bishop Richardot of Cambrai formally elevated his relics to the altar, approving veneration diocese-wide. His relics remain enshrined in the lower side chapel of St. Martin's Church in Sebourg, rebuilt after the fire and later reconstructions. Annual traditions endure. On Trinity Sunday, a procession carries his reliquary to Saint Drogo's cross, led by children dressed as shepherds and shepherdesses, blessing flocks and invoking his aid. Confraternities in Sebourg and Cavan keep his devotion alive, and in Cambrai, a shepherd's mass blesses sheep farmers and lambs each year. The Roman martyrology honors him. At Sebourg in Hainaut, around 1186, Saint Drogo. In search of a simple and solitary life as a shepherd of flocks and then as a pilgrim, he lived for God alone. His patronage reflects his life's themes: shepherds from his early labors, the unattractive or repulsive due to his disfiguring illness, and legends of scaring children, a medieval tale. He also protects specific locales like Baume-les-Messieurs and Fleury-sur-Loire. The oddest patronage coffee and coffeehouses emerged centuries later, with no direct link. Theories abound. His bilocation as a metaphor for baristas multitasking. Night vigils sustained by wakefulness, akin to caffeine, warming barley in hot water resembling brewing. In art, Drogo is depicted as a Benedictine monk with a shepherd's crook and sheep, embodying his dual life of labor and contemplation. His story endures as a testament to redemption through suffering, an orphan noble who became a saint for the humble, the homely, and the hidden, proving that sanctity often grows in the soil of obscurity.